Let's go over what you need to know when you are confronted by the police. Let me first say, I am not an attorney. This video nor any of my videos should ever be considered as legal advice. These tips are based on my experience as a professional private investigator. Throughout my many years of conducting legal investigations, I have seen a lot of mistakes made by defendants in criminal matters. And I wished I could have gone back in time and gave them some of this advice to help them avoid a lot of the problems with their defense cases. But I do not have a TARDIS or any other type of time machine, so I made this video to try to help you so you can hopefully avoid some issues in the future. One of the biggest mistakes I have seen defendants make is refusing to show a cop their identification when asked for it. Now, I know there is no law that requires us to carry any kind of identification on our person here in the United States. Well, except maybe when you're driving, you need to have your driver's license with you, and there may be some other similar laws regarding certain activities. This video is sponsored by OREP Insurance and Working PI Magazine. OREP is a leading provider of private investigator liability insurance. Visit orep.org for a quote today. But as a general rule, I do not have to have any ID on me when I am out walking around in my neighborhood, playing at the park with my grandkids, shopping, or doing any other outside activities. But refusing to show a cop your ID when they ask to see it will usually raise the officer's suspicions, and that can oftentimes lead to them detaining or even arresting you. Not because you don't have an ID, but because you are refusing to cooperate, and that leads them to be more suspicious. This is especially true if you start copying an attitude, if you stand your ground, if you are like, no, officer, I do not have an ID that you can see. It is not illegal for me to not have an ID, and you can't make me show you my ID. Is it right that they can detain you or even arrest you on suspicion? Well, in my opinion, no. But it happens all the time. And generally speaking, once someone starts down that defensive path with the police, it leads to other things like trying to walk away from the officer or being more aggressive with the officer, and that leads down the wrong path. Now, if you don't have any ID on you, then that is fine. Just inform the officer you don't, and why not. Officer, I'm sorry, I was out for a jog and I don't usually carry my wallet with me when I'm out jogging so I don't lose it. Then when they ask you your name and where you live, just be polite and comply. I don't recommend giving them any more information than they ask for, though. So if they ask you your name and where you live, that is quite easy to answer. My name is Joe Smith, and I live around the corner at 123 Main Street, nothing more. A big thing to remember is that you do not have to talk to the officer. You don't have to answer their questions, but that sometimes leads to people being charged with some minor offenses. And remember this too, those minor arrest charges are often on your records forever. Even if you are not found guilty, even if they drop the charges, the arrest is always on your record. And that can and often does become problematic for people down the road when they are applying for jobs and other things. You see, once you are arrested, fingerprinted, and booked, even if that information is removed from county and state records, it is always in the federal system, and it will often come back to haunt people later in life. Another big mistake I have often seen is people letting the police search their car or their house just because the officer asked to. This should be a huge red flag. If the officer asks you to search your car, it is often in a manner like this. Are there any illegal drugs or weapons in your car, sir? And then you say, no, not that I am aware of. Then the officer says, well, then you won't mind if I check really quickly just to be safe, will you? Now you are in a pickle. If you say no, you can't, well, then the officer will assume you are lying. If you say yes, well, now you never know what they may find that was left behind by friends, teenagers, their friends, or other family members. And since it is in the car, when you are in possession of the car, the assumption is that it is yours no matter what. The best way to handle this in almost any scenario is to say, no, I am sorry, but I am not comfortable letting someone I do not know search my car or my home without a warrant. This can and oftentimes will lead to further questioning, and they will say things like, well, if there is nothing dangerous inside, then why won't you let me search? Or should I be afraid of what you have in your car or your home? These types of questions are often asked to elicit more responses from you that allow them to say, well, if there is nothing there, then there is nothing for me to find, right? I have had defense cases where there were illegal drugs and in a few instances, illegal firearms in a car. And once the officer found these things, they immediately made an arrest and it became a huge problem to prove the defendants were not the owners of the things the cops found. You see, once you say they can search your car or they can search your house, well, that search isn't going to be just looking around a little bit, shining their flashlight in a few places and moving along. They will usually bring in assistance and thoroughly search the entire car or house and often bring in a K9 unit to assist them as well. These searches will take hours, and all that time they will have you detained and continue questioning you. This also goes for allowing officers to search your person. Now, you have to be careful here. The police do have a right to pat you down if they have certain suspicions or are worried for their own or other people's safety. For instance, if they see a bulge in your pants pocket, they might be worried it is a gun, and the law does allow them to pat you down for safety, and that makes sense. But if that pat down then leads them to finding a bag of pot or other drugs, that can lead to a lot of other issues. Or even if it is money. I had a case one time where the defendant had a wad of money in his pocket. The cops stopped him because there was a call about a suspicious person going through cars in the area, and he fit the general description. They saw the bulge in his pocket, frisked him, found the money, and that led to further questioning, further suspicions, and further detaining the young man. They ended up arresting him on other unrelated charges besides what the initial call was for, but just the mistake of having all that money in his pocket created an unnecessary problem. In most cases, had he not had that bulge in his pocket because he initially cooperated and showed them his ID and said where he lived and it was in the area, they would have just let him go and just moved along. This young man had just got paid, cashed his check, and liked to go around with lots of cash to flash when he went out for the night. The big thing here is never carry large bags or wads of anything in your pockets. Even if pot is legal in your state, having large quantities on you can lead to suspicion and other issues with the police. Another huge mistake I see people make too is allowing the police to take a quick look at their phone. Again, there is nothing quick about anything the police will do, and once they have your phone, I can almost assuredly say if they have any reasonable suspicions of anything that they see, they will bring in a forensic expert to take an even closer look at the phone. I have seen this used in domestic cases in the past where an ex accuses the other party of violating a restraining order. So the police use the old, well, if you haven't been texting her, then there is nothing wrong with letting us take a quick look at your phone, is there? And then there was nothing they saw on the phone as far as him texting his ex. But they did see some photos of some potentially illegal activities and use that to further detain him, get a search warrant to do a full forensic dump of the phone. This could have been very easily avoided by just saying something like, with all due respect, officer, I do not feel comfortable with someone I do not know going through the contents of my phone. Basically, what I am saying is having any conversations with the police can lead to complications. And what most people do not know is that you do not have to speak to the police about anything here in the United States. Other countries, like Canada, for example, well, they play by an entirely separate set of rules. But here, we have the right to not speak to the police without an attorney present, and even then, we do not have to speak to them. But the biggest mistake of all is when people take that right and turn it into a reason to be hostile, arrogant, or disrespectful. Even though you don't have to speak to the police, you can very easily and very politely tell them you don't wish to do that. Officer, with all due respect, I do not feel comfortable with, and fill in the blank, answering questions without an attorney, letting you search my home, my car, or my phone without a search warrant. Then ask in a very nice manner, am I under arrest? If the answer is no, then ask if you are free to leave. If they say yes, you can leave, then just leave as calmly and peacefully as you can. If they say no, and they detain you or arrest you, then you may need to know how to handle yourself in a police interrogation. And I made this video right here to help you understand the do's and don'ts for that scenario. So check it out now.